Nations Bank closed on its takeover of the San Francisco company then called Bank America. It was at the time the largest bank merger in American history, and by assets created the largest bank in the country. The new behemoth, which would then go, of course, by the name Bank of America, would also become the country's first coast-to-coast bank, and it would put Charlotte on the map as a financial sector powerhouse. Our Gregory Simpson took his camera and spent some time with B of A's archivist to look back on the history-making move that would help shape the city's future.
In 1998, two of the biggest regional banks in the United States merged. Nations Bank, which was headquartered here in Charlotte, had over the course of a decade or two expanded across the Southeast. It merged with Bank America Company, which was founded in San Francisco. It also expanded across interstate lines beginning in the 80s through the 90s, and in 1998 both merged and culminated in the nation's first coast-to-coast retail bank.
Together, we're the new Bank of America.
Banking, it was changing a lot. Banking has been through its up and downs through the course of the United States history. Beginning in the 80s, banks really wanted to branch out and go across, offer their services across state lines. The bigger banks in New York and California were starting to do that early on. I think especially here in Charlotte, many of the local banks, including North Carolina National Bank, Nations Bank, wanted to ensure that they kept their footprint, you know, in their region, wanted to ensure that they were competitive. So they started branching out as well. The bank here goes back to 1874. It was the Commercial National Bank of Charlotte. It remained a small bank up and through the 1960s. The bank really wanted to spread its services across the state. I think it's important for the bank here because they wanted to have that local presence. They've been in Charlotte since the 1800s. It was something that was important to maintain that local control. When NCNB comes onto the scene in the 1960s, it really starts that strategy of growing across the state. By the time Hugh McCall enters the scene in the 1980s, the strategy is decided to expand across state lines. Really puts Charlotte on the map in terms of finance and in terms of banking. So this is the Bank of America Heritage Center. We have been the museum here in Founders Hall in the Bank of America Corporate Center since 2005. This is where we kind of bring all our storytelling together. Because the bank grew by acquisition and acquired many banks across the United States, all those separate banks that acquired had all their own histories. And this is a centralized place where we kind of wanted to put all those best stories, all those origin stories, all those fun stories about all the different legacy banks that make up Bank of America today in one place for people to come and enjoy and view. In any given city, whenever you have an industry that is growing rapidly, it's going to have positive economic impact for the local community. Charlotte just happened to be the place where it had a bank that had a vision and a strategy to grow as a company and to also bring those benefits to the community that it served. If you speak to a lot of people who were in Charlotte in the 80s and 90s, you know, I've spoken to a couple of people who would consider themselves natives, you know, in the 80s, after 5, they said they was pretty much a ghost town. And so I think what growing the bank here really did was just to give it more of a center, give it more activity. It brought people in. It brought, you know, as we expanded across state lines and acquired other banks across the state, it brought many people to Charlotte. So the economy grew, the population grew. Probably an overnight change. I mean, we went from a small regional bank to a super inter-regional bank within the matter of a decade or so. And so that just brought jobs. It brought people to Charlotte. It just brought a lot of economic activity, and it really put Charlotte on the map as a banking center.